Saints, we're going to continue now with this series on the pre-tribulation rapture and what you're not prepared for. In the first message we were talking about that a lot of people are not prepared. God has to call you. God has to choose you. God has to prepare you. How can you be ready for such a thing? Some just believe that everybody that ever said yes to Jesus are going to be raptured. God is just going to forcibly take them before the tribulation starts. Others believe that that happens at the middle of the tribulation. Others believe it happens at the end of the tribulation. But all three are right. There is a pre-tribulation rapture of those who are ready, waiting, and watching. The Gentiles that are not ready, waiting, watching, their lamps aren't lit, they'll go into the tribulation to get dressed, to get ready, to get prepared for their wedding. And they'll be caught up at the middle of the tribulation. But God has to prepare us. God has to call us, choose us, and especially prepare us. Because God is not going to forcibly take anybody to the wedding feast, which was a feast at the Father's house, that the groom took his friends there for that wedding feast while the bride got herself ready. And we were talking about how many people's hearts, in a good way, they'll look back. They have a sick relative. They have older children that are not saved. And they would say in a very legitimate way, I can't go. Excuse me. My kids aren't saved. My mother is sick and she's not saved. Some would even say, I can't leave my dog. Literally, Christians tell me things like that. They're not prepared. They're not ready. That's not even accounting for the ones that love the world and the things of the world. The apostate sons that are out there in the world in the flesh. They're not ready. But a lot of people, their hearts aren't ready. They couldn't leave. They wouldn't want to leave. And God's not forcibly taking anyone anywhere. He is going to call a people, choose a people, and prepare a people for the pre-tribulation rapture. So now we want to talk about, see it in another way, in Lot's wife. This is the pre-tribulation rapture, and what you're not prepared for, and Lot's wife. Because in Luke chapter 17, let's start in verse 27. The Lord's talking about the end times. He's talking about His coming. And as we've had other messages on the days of Noah, He says here, let's start with verse 26. Luke 17:26. And just as it happened in the days of Noah, so it shall be in the days of the Son of Man. We've had other messages on that. Verse 27, they were eating, they were drinking, they were marrying, they were given in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark and the flood came and took them all away. Listen here, saints, verse 28. It was the same as happened in the days of Lot. They were eating, they were drinking, they were buying, they were selling, they were planting, they were building. But on the day that Lot went out from Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. And then he goes on and says, remember Lot's wife. What can we learn from this and see this that's been so distorted? I couldn't believe this as I looked through commentaries to see what the prevailing thoughts out there was on this. Because in verse 32, the Lord says, remember Lot's wife. Whoever seeks to keep his life shall lose it, and whoever loses his life shall preserve it. I tell you, on that night there will be two men in one bed. One will be taken, the other will be left. There will be two women grinding at the same place. One will be taken and the other will be left. We've had other messages in the book of Matthew These are Christians. One's taken, one's left. One's ready, one's not ready. We saw in the last message how a number of people are saved in the tribulation and go into the tribulation that no one can count. If you didn't see that, go and see the previous message. But there's hundreds of millions of Christians in the tribulation. It's in Revelations. We went over that. See the last message if you didn't see that. Because right now we're talking about, he said to remember Lot's wife. And he said one will be taken and one will be left. And what can we see about Lot's wife? Because as God is about to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, as fire is about to rain down from heaven, Lot, his 2 daughters, and his wife are called out of Sodom and Gomorrah. And the angels come and they tell them, do not look behind you. As you're coming out, don't look behind you. So as they're coming out, we all know this story, that in Genesis chapter 19, verse 26, but Lot's wife, because they were all told in verse 17, and it will come about when they had brought them outside, that one said, escape for your life. Do not look behind you. So we're all told this story about Lot's wife. And we go on in verse 26. But his wife from behind him. So his wife is walking behind him. They're leaving the area of Sodom and Gomorrah, as Sodom and Gomorrah is about to fall. But his wife from behind him looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. And I was just thinking, how do people say these things? It's always referred to as a Christian looking back, looking over their shoulders, and then they're lost. They're gone. They're caught up with the hail and brimstone, with the destruction. They go off with the inhabitants of Sodom and Gomorrah. That's what they say happened to Lot's wife. Is that what happened to her? Because look what it says. But his wife from behind looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. Every time you look in the Bible and see or look up or are talking about salt, it's always a good thing. Salt in the Bible means to be lasting. It's permanence. It refers to loyalty, durability, fidelity, usefulness, value, and purification throughout the Bible. But they try to tell you that Lot's wife, as Sodom and Gomorrah is falling, she's walking out and she looks over her shoulder, and then she goes off with Sodom and Gomorrah into destruction. She's lost with them. Is that what's happening? And they tell you that that's a warning for you not to look back. If you're just honest, if you just have eyes to see, ears to hear, and an open heart, we've all looked back. We've all fallen down. We've all failed. She just looked over her shoulder. But she was turned into a pillar of salt. Salt's always a good thing. Saints, this represents two, because the Lord brought it up about the end times when one will be taken and one will be left. If our heart is in Sodom and Gomorrah, the world, Babylon, Egypt, sin, the flesh, even the good things where you'd be concerned, worried about leaving people, if you look back, you'll be caught up in it, not losing your salvation, not falling into the punishment, the death, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. She was turned into a pillar of salt. Those saints that aren't ready, aren't waiting, aren't watching, and go into the tribulation, they'll be like Lot's wife. They'll be encased in salt. They'll be the salt of the earth, as he said we are and should be. They'll be that permanence, that lasting thing, that loyalty, that durability, that fidelity, that usefulness, that value, that purification that salt represents. And some people want to say, no, that's just showing you that you can't look back. Lot's wife looked back, and then she went with the inhabitants of Sodom and Gomorrah into eternal punishment. That is not what it says. Because his two daughters, they didn't look back. Why did Lot's wife look back? She is what I was saying in the first message. Who knows what was in her heart? Maybe she had a sick friend. Maybe she had some other relative there. Maybe she just loved the shopping, the time, the security of Sodom and Gomorrah. She wasn't longing to go into destruction that she knew was coming. She just looked over her shoulder. Her attention, her heart went to something else back there. And she didn't go out with Lot and the other two daughters, but she was turned into a pillar of salt. That's not destruction. That's these good things we just said. But here's something else for you that just, oh no, she went to hell, she went into punishment, she just went to destruction with Sodom and Gomorrah. That's what it represents. Then let me ask you this. Here's something that many of you maybe don't know about the Bible. Maybe it's too much for you right now, but I want you to understand something. I want you to see something. The two daughters did not look over their shoulder. They kept walking forward. They kept their eyes forward. And they're always shown as these virgins in white and walking out with Lot as the wife just looked over her shoulder. But what are these two daughters? Are they a superior people? Are they better than the mother who just looked over her shoulder, but they didn't look over their shoulder? Look what happens right after this, saints. In Genesis 19:31, Lot has went with his two daughters, and now they're living in a cave. Because they're afraid of the people, is what it seems like. The people might blame them for this, or be displeased with them that they were spared or that they caused it. So they're hiding in caves. And look what happens concerning the two daughters. And let's start with verse 30. And Lot went up from Zorah and stayed in the mountains, and his two daughters with him, for he was afraid to stay in Zorah. And he stayed in a cave, he and his two daughters. Now listen to this, saints. You might have to grow up and not be babies in a nursery to hear this. But let's see about the pre-tribulation rapture and what you're not ready for. Lot's wife just looked over her shoulder. Her heart, her attention was somewhere in Sodom and Gomorrah. And everybody tries to make it look like, yeah, she went to destruction. The daughters went straight forward. But look what they're doing next once they're living in these caves. Genesis 19:31. Then the firstborn said to the younger, our father is old, and there is not a man on earth to come into us to have sex with us after the manner of the earth. Now the first thing they're thinking about, these two daughters that are shown to be righteous, they didn't look over their shoulders. And now right away they're like, the people hate us. We're afraid of the people. And now there's not a man that's going to want us. So what do they come up with? The two that went on forward and didn't look back? Come, let us make our father drink wine, and let us lie with him, that we may preserve our family through our father. Immediately they come up with this thing, that they're going to have sex with, they're going to get their father drunk, they're going to have sex with him, that they can have offspring, and their family and their line can go on. So they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went in and laid with her father, and he did not know when she lay down or when she arose. So Lot got drunk with him, but when he was too drunk to know what he was doing, they went in, the first one went in and laid with him. And it came about on the morrow that the firstborn said to the younger. Now the next day, the firstborn, who had already laid with her, got her father drunk and laid with him, said to the younger one, Behold, I lay last night with my father. Let us make him drink wine tonight also. Then you go in and lie with him, that we may preserve our family through our father. They're not trying to be evil about it. In the flesh, they think this is the best thing to do. Nothing is accomplished for God and the kingdom of God through the flesh. It can be from the most minor of the flesh to the worst of the flesh. Some people have good intentions and do horrible things. But these two, this was their idea. Verse 35, So they made their father drink wine that night also, and the younger arose and laid with him, and he did not know when she laid down or when she arose. Thus both the daughters of Lot were with child by their father. And the firstborn bore a son, and called his name Moab, for he is the father of Moabites to this day. And as for the younger, she also bore a son, and called his name Ben-Ammi, and he is the father of the sons of Ammon to this day. So they went in. Oh, I'm not trying to get into the issues of this. I'm just trying to tell you. All these commentators, all these teachers, they want to tell you if you look over your shoulder, you're not worthy of the kingdom of heaven. You got to keep forward. You can never look back. We all fall. We've all failed. We've all failed. Lot's wife just looked over her shoulder. She had something she was concerned about. Something that her heart was in. It's what I said. Can you, will you, would you be ready to go? Do you have ability to leave sick ones, young ones that are not going, they're not saved? They're a relative that's not saved. They're a neighbor you care for. Half the people nowadays, they don't want to leave their dog for 20 seconds. Can you leave? Are you prepared to leave? Knowing that they're going to go through 3.5 years of tribulation. They're also going to, the Christians are going to have the latter-day rain poured out upon them. They're going to get dressed. They're going to get ready for their wedding. But I wanted you to see this because they all put Lot's wife, because she looked over her shoulder, with Sodom and Gomorrah, gone with Sodom and Gomorrah, destroyed with Sodom and Gomorrah, put with Sodom and Gomorrah for eternity. But she was encased in salt. The ones whose hearts ain't ready to leave, the ones that will be looking back, the ones that aren't yet prepared, they will become the salt of the earth. They will be that thing that the salt represents. They'll be left. They'll be caught up in the tribulation. But they will be lasting. They'll be loyal to the Lord. They'll have durability, fidelity, usefulness, value, purification as they get ready for their wedding and as they prepare the way of the Lord.